All right. Well, my name is Drea Young. At this point in my life, am basically a DJ and a host of a lot of things. I'm Philly Drag Mafia, Brittany Lynn's main DJ. I do DJ at a lot of different gay bars and around the suburbs. Um, and that's about what I'm doing and who I am.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us right now. So, for context, who we're speaking to, these are folks who probably just engaged in a screening of Last Call at Mods. So, this was actually my pick, and I wanted to amplify anything I could to talk about the concept of a lesbian bar, the impact that it has on the community, and the impact that this disappearance of lesbian bars has had. There's a lesbian bar project that has kind of gained some notoriety in discussing some of these bars. Obviously, Last Call at Mods is a documentary talking about this. But I specifically wanted to speak with you and thank you again because I had the pleasure of going to Toasted Walnut back in 2016. I think it was International Women's Day, I think, ironically enough. I was shooting a queer web series and we were just going there and some folks allowed us to talk to people and also we were just there to have a great time. And that was my first experience. That was when I first turned 21. So that was my first ever experience in
Oh,
a
baby.
space like that. Yeah, in a space like that. And it had such a tremendous impact on my life and in my identity. And so I really wanted to be intentional about who we were amplifying in having this discussion. So would you mind going into as much detail as you like about your experience with Toasted Walnut and how and when that might have even started?
So I actually started. So Denise Cohen, I don't know if you looked her up at
Mhm.
all. She was the owner. So she was the GM of Sisters. Basically, I turned 21 in what, 2002. So I started going there then. That was when I first started, that was my first lesbian club experience. Yeah, and then I went off, I do a lot of music stuff. So I went off into my own career. And then I came back and she was basically like, Sisters closed. And she was like, I'm opening this bar. Do you want to be part of it? And I was like, okay, sure. So at that time, I was still bartending a lot. So I helped her out opening the bar. And and then we went from there. And actually, that's where I started DJing. She gave me the opportunity to start DJing, and then that turned into a whole bunch of stuff.
Are you from
Um,
Pennsylvania originally? Have you lived in Pennsylvania or in the area your whole life? Or
I've lived in Pennsylvania a lot of my life, like all around Pennsylvania. I did move a lot also. But Philly has been basically, I worked in Manhattan for a couple years when I was more of an audio engineer, and I actually won a couple Grammys. So that's good.
congrats.
But I like to entertain more than sit in the studio. So the
Mhm.
DJ thing kind of like took off. Um, but yeah, Philly's been where I most, been hanging out for a long time. But I've
Sure.
lived all around. Yeah.
Sure. So then what about this idea of a place, of a bar like Toasted Walnut like existing in Philly? What can you say anything about like the impact of having a space like that existing specifically in Philly, what that was like or what that meant maybe?
I think I think it's obviously a really important thing to have lesbian bars. When Toasted Walnut was open, it was kind of kind of hard because it's such an open community, I guess, now with everyone that I know that she wanted to make it a lesbian bar, but it's like, but we wanted to welcome everybody. Um, and sometimes we, it got confusing, I think, to some people what was going on at this bar. But, and then some people would be like, oh, that's a lesbian bar. Like, we're not going to the lesbian bar. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
And it really was kind of a struggle. Like we kind of had a hard time. We had a good first year, and then it was a lot of struggle to keep it going. And as far as lesbians, like actual, like, well, whatever,
Hmm.
lesbians, they're tough too, because like you would see them and then you wouldn't see them for months, and that's how you knew they were going through a breakup. Like once they get linked up, now it's Netflix and chill or whatever, and we don't see them. So like we need support from, to be an existing lesbian bar, you need support,
Yeah.
obviously, from everybody. And I think that was like a hard part of it, was like getting enough sales and, continuing. And and the owner wasn't like this, multi-millionaire, like this. A lot of people in the neighborhood in Philadelphia, a lot of the owners have a lot of money, where
Mm.
we didn't have that. We didn't have that, so it was really like a struggle to keep up. And if people weren't supporting, they weren't supporting, So
Sure.
yeah.
Absolutely. And this is, I think I read it in an interview, an article that you did a couple of years ago, but also I was just recently talking about this with some friends. I have a lot of friends in the neighborhood, and typically whenever I go out with them, they want to go to one specific like a queer affirming space, but it's like a piano bar, or there's something tied to its identity to that some might argue is a little too niche. So you're talking about like, people coming in and, like, oh, the title might be even off-putting. Um, and I feel like specifically, and I think this was cited in another article about this idea that it almost works against this concept of a lesbian bar because, you can either exist in a place for everyone and maybe you have themed nights or some programming catered towards that. But if that's not a part of your identity, then like it almost kind of works against you. So could you maybe talk about like the programming that would go on, and or any type of thematic events or things that you would do there?
So let's see. So we did typical karaoke. Um, Denise is, I think she's about 15, 20 years older than me. So she used to, on Sundays, do the back in the day, like tea dance party for older
Mhm.
lesbians, which was super cute because it was like a bunch of grandmas like coming in and, doing their thing, which was
Mhm.
super cute. Um, and we did the typical dance parties on a Saturday night. We would have like, go-go dancers, things like that. She was very in with, the softball teams, and I'm just trying to think of what else. She was more involved with all the programming than I was, but um, that's kind of like a basis of things, I
Sure.
think. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I even so again citing these articles, but you said I think it was you quoting talking about like, oh, Eagles fans should come here to watch the game. You talked about karaoke nights and brunches and Bloody Mary bars, and it
Oh
just
yeah, we did. Oh
and
yeah, that was way back. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, yeah, and things like that. It's just like, but that's so awesome and so exciting. I know when I went, it was such, I don't want to say culture shock, but like such like an overwhelm of just like, oh my gosh, this is what dreams are made of. It was so cool and it was so fun. And I think that's
And it was a
something
beautiful space. It's a
yeah,
shame. She renovated that whole space.
yeah, yeah.
And it was a sushi bar. And
Wow.
she renovated the whole space. And then after she renovated, I don't know. There was a lot of push from the landlords too, which I'm not going to, go into all
Sure,
of that,
sure.
but which also made it more difficult because once the space turned into this beautiful space, it was almost like they wanted it back,
Mm,
And it was just like between that was happening, and then there was like push from the community in certain ways, and it was like I don't know. I just when I think of Toast of Walnut, and I don't know if we'd want this in the thing, but it,
yeah,
it was a lot of struggle. It was a
yeah,
lot of struggle to make it happen and like get people there and to be successful, and in the time and during it, I feel like there was an identity loss because we were trying so hard to, you know, it like lesbians that just want a lesbian bar might go there and be like, this isn't a lesbian bar, like blah
mhm,
blah blah. Then there's other lesbians that are open-minded and different pronouns and all these things that might have felt good there. You know what I mean? And it was just like, and then there was like, some gay men would come, but then other gay men would be like, no, we can't go to the lesbian bar. And I'm like, but it's like, what is the problem? Can't we all
yeah,
just get along?
yeah.
Like the
Exactly.
community
Like,
even now in the community, I'm just like, can't we all just get along?
right. Especially,
Like, why are we so like we're all about love and unity and we're just
yep,
dividing
yep.
each other up, and I don't know.
For sure. No, I absolutely I relate to that and I get it too. It's almost like this battle of just this wanting this, I don't want to say the word entitlement, but this idea, and obviously with the queer community and the long history of just like having this idea where this is your own and this like you own this versus like, well, we want it to be inclusive for all, then it's almost like, well, I no longer feel like I have ownership over something if it's not only for me. It's really interesting to kind of
Well,
dive
and I don't think
into.
people understand how hard it is to keep an establishment open and
Yeah.
that you need to support an establishment. Like you can't just go in and drink water. Like,
Mm,
like something at Toasted Walnut. Um, you know, people would go to, you know, Woody's or Taboo or all these other places and get smashed. And then they'd come at the end of the night and ask for water. And I'm like, well, you have to buy a bottle of water because this is a beverage business and you're smashed.
Yeah.
And like, I'm not going to, like, you got to buy something and there's
Right.
no kitchen open right now. So if we just give everybody water and then you tell me you want this bar to be here and how much you love it, but like, you have to support. And that's where a lot of people, I think also in the younger generation, because I work in some other venues, and I just don't think that people understand how much it takes to keep a venue alive and how much money and support that you do need.
Sure. Absolutely. What was the staff like there at Toasted Walnut?
Oh, the staff was fun. So we had some lesbians and then we had some we had a nice mix. We had some
Yeah.
trans, some lesbians, bisexual, and you know, we always had a good time. The staff
Yeah.
was cool. Yeah.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
awesome. Do you have any insight as to how Toasted Walnut got its name at all?
Yeah, that definitely had to be Denise
Yeah.
because, and I know her brain, and she probably, I mean, it's toasted walnut, you know, it's on
Yeah.
Walnut Street. You're here to get toasted. I'm assuming that's where it came from.
That's awesome. That's
Yeah.
so cool.
People are missing it now, like, because I'm DJing at Bar X a lot. Every other Saturday, I'm at Taboo, and like I said, I'm Philly Drag Mafia's main DJ. So I don't know if you know that drag team, but
Hmm.
they've been around for 27 years, and we're all over the place. And a lot of people are like, "Oh, I miss Toast and Walnut," you know, and I'm like, "Well, I wish you guys would have supported it while we were there." Like,
Sure.
I don't know what to tell you,
So
you know?
we're talking about when it unfortunately did close, and obviously a lot of businesses just in general were impacted by the pandemic. And I think if my dates are correctly, I think it said something along the lines of essentially closed in November because indoor dining. So when indoor dining was temporarily suspended for a lot of establishments, I know some people who weren't even aware that it closed, and I was like, "What do you mean? Like, how
Yeah.
are you not aware of this? Like, what were we engaging with during this time, and whether or not it was just people just choosing not to engage with things. I think there was just this overwhelm of burnout and information because everyone was just inside and we were just digesting what channels that we were getting. But um obviously, yes, so the pandemic and then 2020, and there was some sightings like you were talking about landlords, but just rent in general.
The landlords were not working with her. So they
Mm,
wanted, and the rent was very high.
right.
So they wanted all the rent money, but we
Right.
weren't
And
open doing it. And then
sure.
Denise actually got very sick in
Hmm.
December 2020, I think it was. She got cancer.
Hmm.
So then it was like, do I continue to fight for this bar or do I
Mm,
fight for my life? And that was kind of like the drawing line because she was like, I can't. Like, you know what I mean? And she had a huge she's good now. And there's
hmm.
definitely after effects and whatever happens with
Right.
cancer. Um, it was bad for her for a good like 2021 was like really bad, like during chemo and all that. So that was a huge part of like, what do I do now? And I was like, could it get any worse? Like the pandemic, there was something else that happened to her before that, and it was the pandemic and then cancer. And I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. You know, like
Mhm.
this is not going to work.
No, I can't imagine going through that hardship. And then on top of that, like, especially when, I've read and I've had people talk about Denise, because you were talking about like where she had experience previously. It was very rooted in this idea of these bars and these spaces and just queer affirming spaces. And then to have to navigate losing that and or even just like trying to fight for it and just not really
Yeah,
have
she
that
had to
support.
fight. Yeah, that I mean, if anybody was going to, and then yeah, it's no one's really taken her place at this point, you know,
Hmm.
of like opening up something like that and doing that. I do have a couple things coming up where people are trying to create, um, you know, some more like she they inclusive
Sure.
kind of party that gives people like, you know, to give that space to those kind of people coming up. So we'll see how that goes.
So it's interesting to see then on top of that, like the additional struggles of just like feeling the pressure of like, all right, if we're going to be this space, but we want it to be for all, like what does that look like and how do we support that by also getting support back from from the community. It's really interesting to.
I guess like you were saying earlier, is like themed nights, like it's the only way to really do that. Is to
Right.
know that you're a space that you're open to everyone, but this can be for this, and this can be for this, and this can be for this, you know?
Sure. I think also, and this might have been a quote from Denise, in talking about the closure and why, or in response just to the lesbian bar project, like why we're seeing so many of these establishments just disappear. Or obviously, when we say disappear, like most of the time, then you were talking about this, it's people probably just reclaiming spaces and weaponizing this idea of like, well, I have the money, you don't, and I'm taking it back or whatever.
That's like a huge thing.
Hmm.
I feel like
For
people with
sure.
money, you know?
Yeah, and something else I think that was cited, it says in recent years, it's a possibility that because in recent years it's become more socially acceptable for two women to show public displays of affection than two men, and that was really interesting to me too. Because in the same vein, you're like, wow, that's cool, that's awesome that people feel like they can be out in public and they're doing this. But then on the same by the same token, you're just kind of like, all right, but then like this idea of having this space, this affinity space where not everyone has the privilege of being of feeling comfortable or being able to pass. I think a lot of the times, like I have friends and they're like, oh yeah, I totally pass right now. Like they think that we're best friends. We're actually a couple. It's like
Yeah,
great, you have the privilege to do that. Or some other
yeah.
people within their gender expression, what they don't have that. So it's interesting to think that that might be a big factor as to why people don't feel like there's a need for these spaces. And it's not in a way to like separate the community. Like you're saying, the goal for Toast was to bring people together. It's just like, but it's owned and operated by people in this community, but it's for everyone in this queer
It's a
community. So
mess. It's a
yeah,
mess.
yeah,
But yeah, that point is right, and that's something I've thought about. Is it is acceptable, and
mm-hmm.
like when I'm in the suburbs, at some of these bars, like I want to do certain events, but they're like the bar guests are like, don't bring that, don't. But if there's lesbians, like it's fine. It's like, all right, now, like whatever, and that's just how people think. And then yes, I think that does make less of a need for a special space because now you just can go anywhere. But and then like I said earlier with lesbians, once they meet someone, they're gone.
Yeah,
You don't see them.
for
So
sure.
like if everybody links up, then like no one's coming to the bar, or but I mean, who knows?
Yeah,
I don't
for
I don't
sure.
I'm gonna
So
start doing this I think starting in like a week or two at Bar X in their basement, which is a cute little space that almost like I feel like is gonna give the feel of like back in the day, like a little space where we're going.
mhm.
Um it's going to be a Sunday fun day from like 3 to 8. And Stonewall, right? They're in some season of playing games, so we're gonna try to start it the 21st. Um, and that's gonna be, I feel like one of the only spaces. There is Stir, which you've probably heard of, and
Mhm,
Stephanie
mhm.
Mixer, who does a lot of things. But I feel like I'm kind of excited about this party because I feel like it's like a throwback. Like this is who this party's for. Of course, everyone's included, and you have to figure out your wording on a flyer because there's so much going on in 2024.
Mhm.
It's like, how do we make it seem like, okay, this is what it is, but don't
Yep,
be afraid to go down there, you
sure.
know? So, but I'm pretty excited about that because I probably won't even realize how much I've missed it. You know what I mean? I've had a girlfriend for like almost 8 years. Like I'm not even
Mhm.
looking. I'm just out there having fun. I'm loyal.
Sure.
I like to entertain. I have a bunch of shows that I do all that stuff. But like, so I'm excited to see like who it brings in, and we're starting it during the season, hoping that it's something that they like everyone likes, and then when the season ends, we can just continue this tea party on Sundays, um, like a Sunday fun day thing that people just like, females, they just know to, oh, hey, we'll go to Bar X. You know what I mean? They got a
Sure.
space for us on Sunday Fun Day. So
Yeah, that's
I don't
awesome.
think anybody else in the actual neighborhood is really focusing on that right now.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you for sharing that. So you mentioned how obviously you started with Tosawana and then you kind of started DJing there. Is that what you said? And
Yeah,
then
that's where I started DJing. She knew my music background because she's known me since I turned 21.
mhm,
Denise has. So I was bartending and I was like, these DJs, I don't know. I just was like, I feel like, I don't know. I feel like these DJs are killing my pocket. Like something's
Yeah.
going wrong. You know what I mean? And then she's like, she basically was like, how about this? Your birthday, my birthday's August 19th. She's like, we'll have a party on August 18th, a birthday party. You're going to DJ. And I was like, oh,
Okay.
okay. I never thought of being a DJ. And so day of, I still didn't have a laptop, nothing. I had my studio computer because I was an audio
Mm-hmm.
engineer. I
Mm-hmm.
didn't have a collection of music. Thank God for Google. And
Mm-hmm.
I had nothing. And at 3 p.m., because I didn't think I'd ever do it again. And
Yeah.
at 3 p.m., I was that day I was supposed to go on at 10. I'm like, maybe I'll go get a laptop. So I went and got a laptop. And then like the story just kind of continues where then I ended up getting a DJ controller and like these different, and then it started making sense because as a musical person, I always was an audio engineer and a producer, and I know how to mix, I know how to do all that. And then I love to party. And now, like, now I'm 42, so I don't party like I used to, but
Mm-hmm.
like I'm very involved. Like I still love parties. Like, and I love now it's like the leader of the party,
Right.
And it kind of then I was like, wait, ah. So Denise, yeah, Denise was the one that kind of was like, you're doing this. And then
Mm-hmm.
I didn't even know if I was going to do it again after the first time I did it. So I started buying masks and like weird things. And I feel like I was making up for my lack of talent because,
Mm.
just to entertain more. So I had these big
Sure,
slot
sure.
heads and these big, like, just to like these masks and all this. And then like now I don't even have time for all that. I'm like,
Yeah.
no, I threw the masks out. I'm like, we're just DJing now. But yeah, it continued like so her, and then I was doing stuff before the pandemic for Gay Men's Club, and then Chicky and Pete started doing an
Mm-hmm.
LGBTQ thing with me, and then like I was actually getting at a height in like music and making money actually from it and all that, and then the pandemic hit.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like now I'm feeling like I'm the most back than in my community, like the community that I've ever been, because I lived in Philadelphia, but I literally could walk 5 minutes to Bensalem. So
Mm-hmm.
the pandemic, you couldn't work in Philly, but you could work in the suburbs.
Mm.
So then I started bartending at a bar like 5 minutes down the street from me. And then I slowly started DJing at all these bars too. And nothing against them all. Like I love all these people, but like I now for years I've been like doing this, and it's like it just feels good to, even though the community is like so crazy
Mm-hmm.
and so much drama that I'm not even involved in. I'm just a DJ.
Yeah.
So I work with all these different people that might have drama with each other, and I'm like, what is going on? So
Yeah.
I just DJ. I don't know, like, but I'm not a drama person. I don't like to step on people's toes. Like I don't know, just trying to love and have a good time. But it feels good to somehow I'm trickling back in like a lot
Mm-hmm.
the neighborhood area. And there's a lot going on in the neighborhood right now. Like I feel
Sure.
like the pandemic definitely changed the pandemic, like for the younger generation, it made them find other ways to still party.
Yeah.
So like a lot of which I love because I was an underground raver kid back in the 90s, and I do love how the underground scene kind of came back in Philly. So they're not really necessarily in the major gay clubs. They're more like they've created their own new spaces or found new spaces and doing a lot of DIY kind of stuff. And I think the pandemic really like changed the bar scene in a certain way with that for the
Sure.
younger generation.
Yeah. That's awesome. So you also were talking about audio engineering, and I wanted to know if there's any maybe standout moment that you've had in your career so far where you're just like that also was really, really cool, or someone you got to interact with, or just any type of recognition that you might have received.
So I did a lot of cool things. I was in Manhattan so I went to Full Sail University from 2007 to 2008. Then right from there, I went and worked in Manhattan. And I was like, it was a pretty cool time because it was like the economy disaster in 2008. Like all these studios were closing, it felt like almost the music business was like in a panic because of everything that was happening in Manhattan. So many things were closing. And I started working for, um, the one guy was the manager of Sony Studios and the other guy was the vice president. And Sony Studios was about to shut down, and they built this little studio to hold their clients over while they were trying to build a bigger thing, which never happened. And I got in that mix, which was kind of cool because I helped them build the studio, this and that. And I was the only one that worked there. Mm-hmm. So Brian was the vice president of Sony Studios, and he had like jazz clients, opera, like all that kind of music. And then Tony, he was the studio manager there, and he had hip hop and pop and all that kind of stuff, but like all the major. So I was there at 10 a.m. with classical and midnight, like 24/7 with all these different genres. I worked with Beyonce, Justin Timberlake, Yo-Yo Ma, Bjork, to name a few. And then Esperanza Spalding, mm-hmm. She's the one, she won Best New Artist in 2010. So I got a Grammy out of that. I had moved back to Philly at that point because I was a mm-hmm. financial investor, and I had no idea. I was like, I got to go home. I got to bartend again. This is crazy, because I wasn't making a lot of money. Right. Of course, female music industry, mm-hmm. starting out, whole story there too, Yeah. And and then and then the following year, another project won a Grammy that I'll mention it, but like it was for best opera recording, and I wasn't even there for the recording. Mm-hmm. I was there during the mixing of it all, like the assisting. So I was like, I don't feel like I really deserve this one, because then if you want to talk to me about the recording, I'd be like, I have no idea. And I'm a very honest person. I'm not like trying to, So that happened, and there was a couple other things that happened, and it was pretty cool. And then, but all those experiences is what Music Is Our Hero, where that came from, was because I didn't necessarily like how I was being treated in certain aspects in the major industry, and I there was just things I didn't like, and so I wanted to start my own mission of like always just spreading love, not being like in the major world, all these artists that are dying or addictions and all, like, this doesn't have to happen. Mm-hmm. But, like, the message that they give to the younger kids, with some of the music, like, this doesn't have to happen. We can actually put a good message out, and we could actually change the lives of these kids because music is so powerful. But you choose to feed them with this bullshit and you could care less if they all rot in the club and die. And so that's why I was like, I can't do this, and I didn't even care. Like, I had Puff Daddy's whatever hitting me up, and I was like, no, I don't even care who you are or what your name is. I just don't like working for you anymore, Yeah. So then Music Is Our Hero, that started a long time ago because music saved my life. I have a whole story as a child, and I always turned to music. And so that's how that became a thing. Because if I didn't have music literally every day, even now, every day of my life, it's all I do. And if I didn't, I'd probably be out there getting in trouble or being drunk or doing just, it gives me a direction. And that's how that started.
Great. Well, thank you so much for sharing all of that. Just one final question. You kind of already have touched on it, but maybe any more lasting thoughts about the importance then of engaging with either this idea of queer artists or queer business owners or whatnot. Like, why is it important to give that support that you were talking about before?
That's basically it. I mean, if you're not going to support things, it's not going to exist. So I don't, and like right now in 2024, it is a lot going on. It's a lot going on, and it's so easily for people to get online and just bash before they even try to solve the problem. Like, and then everybody hops on that train, and it's like, okay, you could have contacted whoever, communicated, and guess what? If you bump heads and don't get along, then move on. You don't have to, unless they really do something that it's like, no one should ever work with this person. This was my experience. But people have to live their own experiences and find out, like, just because you don't, like, there's plenty of people in the community that don't operate together, but doesn't mean I don't operate with those people. Mm-hmm. So it's all about your own personal experience. And the going online and bashing, I'm just like, at an end with, because I've worked with so many different venues and places that this has happened to, and it's like it's not helping.
Right.
It's not helping, you know, it's just hurting. It's hurting and it's taking away from something that has taken so long to build. And like, you know, so then people stop supporting. Then
Yeah.
what's going to happen? Now, some of these places that this happens to, people, the owners have a lot of money and they can get through it. Some places don't. And then it's like, okay, well, now we don't have that space,
Mm-hmm.
you know? So I guess if I was to say anything, yeah, support the ones and whatever you believe in and who you love. And otherwise you can't exist and they'll support you back. And yeah, stop the bashing. Figure it out, communicate. Just go
Yeah.
online and say something and then get the whole community fired up.
Mm-hmm.
Like, now what have you done? Okay, good job. You know, that's how it
Ex-
feels.
Great. Well, thank you so much for your time today and for this discussion. I, you know, like I said before, this was a space that impacted me greatly, impacted my friends greatly. So I just really appreciate that and your honesty with everything, because especially in 2024, I feel like sometimes you just gotta pull it all away and just be honest about what was going on. So thank you so much. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate you reaching out and having me.